Dirty books. I was one of the few publications that Malcolm had read that did not have pictures of naked women in them. He had the sexual drive of a young man but lacked the looks and charm that would bring satisfaction with a real woman. He had partners but nobody who would bring herself to love him. Love-making was rapid and not a good experience for the women he bought, who he called girlfriends, but they called him a customer. Now, after a number of difficult years, he had grown from being a buyer of sexual images to being a producer of them. It started when he persuaded an escort girl to pose as he was filmed in the act by a friend who was paid by using the same girl afterwards. The film was sold to his friends for favours and drugs, and it occurred to him that there was a living to be made from selling rather than buying. As you can see, I am free of porno, very graphic images of couples having sex in a variety of ways that would have made the acrobats of Cirque du Soleil look like amateurs, as was my first printing. He did not read much of me. I was beyond his imagination and ability to understand words rather than pictures. I was glad because I did not like the idea of being held by hands that had touched his body and the bodies of the numerous ladies of the night he had used and porn stars he had groped in his business of making films of Viagra-soaked penises being pushed into every available orifice of women who justified their profession as acting rather than being exploited. He put me in a corner of his room, the so-called studio, where his actors would rest, have some drugs and get ready for the next part of the daily marathon. Yes, Malcolm was a movie producer who sold his two-dimensional thrills to people who were unable to get three-dimensional people to lead a regular life with. Much to my annoyance, I became part of his work quite unwittingly. One of the bed legs on his main prop had been damaged by the continual bumping, bouncing, bounding, springing and crashing of two or more bodies creating love-free lovemaking. Martha held me tight to her naked body as she crouched in a corner looking away from everything and just hiding by looking at the walls. I seemed to comfort her as she sat trying to blank out the noises of fake love in the background. She needed a different life away from the constant stabbing by a variety of pumped-up penises that hurt her sense of self-worth as much as daggers. I was something she could hold on to without fear of forced sex or pain. So alone, I was the only company she had in the shadows from the big lights used to illuminate the sordid activities that happened in the studio. The story of Martha was a sad one. She had been hooked on heroin since the age of 12. She used it to escape from the abuse of her father and his friends who paid for the use of a young girl. She had exchanged that exploitation for her life as a porn star who was abused by men, but some of the money made was given to her to support her drug habit. Her life was miserable. Malcolm saw she was distressed and walked over to her. He saw she was holding me and ripped me from her trembling hands. "Just what I needed," he muttered as he walked away with no concern for Martha whatsoever. To him, she was just a component, as if she were a sack of flour in a biscuit factory. Lifting up the corner of the bed, he put me under the leg to level the thing up. It was undignified for me to be used by the porn industry when all I did was absorb the stories of all the parties involved as they humped each other, took cocaine, and drank extraordinary amounts of wine, whiskey, or whatever else that would hit me after being spilt or spat out. I was published to entertain and inform, not as a film extra. I can see some of my other readers being excited by what they have read here, but I know your reaction, and it is not a strange one, just shock at what I was involved with. My issue is that, as a book, I am in the same broad category as other books, yet every book is different in the same way that Malcolm's films were different to Disney's children's films. What is not seen in a porn film is the suffering that the actors go through. Some of the men and women involved had read me in the green room, the corner where they would prepare. Men would dose up on Viagra, and the women would drink to make them numb and beyond feeling anything apart from doing the pantomime of having an erotic and exciting time, even though they were in a cramped studio with mic booms and cameras filming every available part of their bodies. The setup was as unromantic as watching meat being prepared in an abattoir before being cooked and served in a high-class restaurant. It was all about fake from beginning to end, and the only thing that was real was the money Malcolm made from selling the lowest points of people's lives dressed up like Christmas turkeys. Once the glitter and shiny foil was removed, all that remained were porn stars who had no other way to make a living. With nobody to read me and for me to read their lives, I was alone in that place, as if in a coffin made from my book cover that kept me trapped as a piece of the filthy furniture in that location where fantasies for watchers were made. Within this tale there is no resolution. The porn industry will never end. The diverse needs of people who take part and who buy will never be satisfied. The greed of the producers will ensure that the business will continue into the future and become more horrific. I was glad when a new bed was bought and I was removed from the premises and given a home on the bookshelf of one of the actresses who had become too old to participate and earned a small living by scrubbing, dusting, and washing the place after the films were shot. She found me with the debris from the old bed, took me away, and I was able to comfort her in the only way I could, as a book for her to read. Out of a sense of respect, her story is not told here.